Mike Cabot, the man with the plan, all the way from Los Altos, GTM leader, CRO, a lot of acronyms, CRO at Moogsoft. Welcome to the Sales Podcast. How the heck are you?
I'm great, Wes. Thanks for having me.
So, man, okay, this whole GTM, GTM, ABM, I've been out of corporate America for a minute, but I'm selling some tools in that space. And those acronyms kept popping up. And I started Googling them and reading about it and talking to people. And it seems like common sense sales and marketing to me. Am I just a simpleton?
No, I think go-to-market is really just just collapsing this idea of everything that's around sort of sales and marketing into one area. But around ABM, yeah, I used to sell an ABM tool actually. And I always found it interesting because what people think about as account-based marketing or account-based ABS, account-based selling, means all kinds of different things. But at the end of the day, those of us who have been in sales, it's like, yeah, I got to sell. If it's a big enough sale, I got to sell to the company. So of course I'm going to think that way. So to me, in a lot of ways, it was just putting a label on that. But there's some sort of technology and some processes that got developed between sales and marketing around the concept of ABM, which I think were helpful.
Yeah. Cool. So you are a little different guest. I have a lot of like entrepreneurs, people in that space, but you're in the enterprise space. Is that fair to say, or that's been the bulk of your experience?
Yeah.
What are you seeing right now in that space? Because I have a lot of people that listen that are W-2 salespeople, VPs of sales, sales managers that are in that space. What are you? Rather than say we all know what's challenging or we all have our own challenges, but what the hell's working right now?
Yeah, I think just Ty, one of the things that's not working, I think, is technology's made a lot of this prospecting and way to engage with prospects. It's just made it so easy that this efficiency has created problems for us as sellers. It's made it, and buyers now, I think, are they're just so inundated with just constant barrage of inbound calls and emails and everything else. So I think that it's up to us now to figure out ways to engage people on a more real level, help people understand what we do and be personalized in our outreach. And I think ultimately people are expecting more from these engagements than they used to get, right? There used to be information scarce. Now information is everywhere. People expect a certain amount of value at the front end before they commit and before they maybe buy something. I think that's also changed for us as sellers. We need to find ways to add value at the front end, not just sort of sell and then deliver afterwards.
So what does that mean? I can do some list segmentation, take a wild ass guess or an educated wild ass guess of who, my buyer persona. I think I have an idea. But how do I know what they're interested in?
Yeah, I think some of it is trying to take proxy information, right? So if for example, that certain industries and certain roles have issues, can we take those learnings and take them elsewhere? So I always tell my SDR team that's doing prospecting that the biggest thing we can do on the front end to add value is to help people understand how their peers are solving similar problems. So whether or not they buy our software or buy our services, if we can explain to them how other people are solving problems they have, then that's value. And what problems do they have? Well, if they look like these other companies, look like similar roles, they probably are coming across similar problems.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I feel like that hasn't changed in literally decades. When I moved to California in 2004 because I was with a tech startup and I had the 18 Western states and we sold into very clear cut verticals. And healthcare was one of them. That was my big one. And that's all I did. Right. And fortunately in healthcare, it wasn't quite the competition, right? It's not like I'm selling to Ford and they want me to be quiet. I can't go sell to Chevy. Healthcare, they got together, they shared information. Mm-hmm. So that was nice. So I could talk about the hospital across the street and they were interested. So, that seems like common sense again to me, but common sense isn't always common, is it?
Yeah, and I think it's also potentially going beyond verticals, right? I think, it could be based on their certain technology stack, or it could be based on their geography, or it could be based on the cycles of how they, produce new products. There could be similarities that are beyond sort of just based on industry, based on other attributes about their business that could make them more similar. But I think
Sure.
getting that information is hard, but if you can get to it and then but I agree with you. I mean, I was doing that 20 years ago as a sales development rep myself. So it's not a new idea, but I think it's just more and more important now that technology's made it so easy to reach out to people.
Yeah. How are you reaching people now? Are you selling in the enterprise space, or do you go down into the SMB space? Like what size client is typical, and how do you reach them?
Yeah, most of our customers are, they're the Fortune 2000 companies. They tend to be large. They tend to really care about uptime of their applications. And how do we get into them? Well, it's multi-channel. I mean, I think, it used to be people, we just called all day long, and then people got really into email and social selling, and then mailers and events. And as it turns out, everything I've read about this is that what matters is that you touch people across a number of different channels, because we don't know which channel is going to be most effective. For example, I never answer my phone, even though I tell my team to cold call people. I never take cold calls, but a really well-written, personalized email that references some value, I'm likely to respond to that. Maybe less likely to respond to something over social, but other people, they respond over social or they respond to phone calls. So we don't really know. So the key is, I think, finding ways to just touch people through a lot of different channels. That's one thing that's working. And I think the other thing that's working is, again, this idea of, we have great examples from well-known customer brands that people care about hearing about, and making sure that we're telling those stories and bringing those back to other people. And that seems to be working as well, because that allows that person sort of be the smartest person in the room, right? They can go sit down in a room and say, like, right, if you're Chevy, hey, do you know what Ford is doing to solve this problem? Like, people want to hear that. That's real value. Oh, I lost you there.
Oh, I was on mute. You say social doesn't work, but man, I saw you from your karaoke videos on TikTok. So come on, man. Come on. Tell everyone we know.
I'm not saying social doesn't work. I'm just saying it's one of the things. Did you actually see my there probably are karaoke videos of me.
Oh, now I'm gonna go search.
I thought that was real.
Oh man, who knows what's out there? People are like, you can't use TikTok because the Chinese are spying on you. It's like, look, dude, ever since the Patriot Act, everybody's spying on everybody, especially our own government. So just slow your roll.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I've always told people multimedia, multi-step, phone call, email, direct mail, find them on social, go out in person, host events, see what the hell works. And what works today may not work tomorrow. So, always be testing. If you find something that works, hit it hard.
Yeah.
But don't think it'll last forever. Always, 10, 20%, spend some time, energy developing that secondary, tertiary channel.
Yeah.
When things stop working, it's like, usually it's just overnight, instead of this like gradual little, like a tire blowing out, like, holy crap. And it never happens at a good time, does it?
Yeah. Well, I think people too assume that just because they don't get a phone call back, that the phone call wasn't helpful. And it turns out, right, that it's exponential improvement every time you layer in a new channel. It's not just linear. You actually get that much more bang for your buck when you do that, because all those things, even if they maybe respond over social, that email helps support that, the phone call helps support it. Maybe you mailed them something. All those things go into getting a successful response for somebody.
Yeah, a friend of mine he's got some tracking software, because typically we think, oh, the last touch was the thing that did it. But yeah, I mean, they maybe saw your ads on Facebook or whatever, the retargeting for a month. And then the email comes through. Well, they were receptive because for a month they've been seeing your ads and maybe clicking some tutorials. Yeah. So it's not, everybody will double down on email. Maybe.
Right.
So you got to get that proper attribution, but that can be tough. Like, is that something you have to deal with?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, this idea that we're ever going to get to true attribution is probably false. But what we can do is find ways to get better attribution and understand, what this idea of influenced or what touched these things that were successful. So, well, can we say that this one specific thing was the reason? Probably not. But can we say that 80% of the things that were successful were part of that? Okay, that's helpful to know. So that means that something about that seems to be resonating. And sometimes, right, understanding correlation and causation is difficult, but if it is correlated, there's something there and it's worth sort of doubling down on. But yeah, I think attribution is an important part of understanding where to go put your money and your time.
Yeah. Are you doing trade shows? I mean, are you back to traveling? So I've talked to a lot of people that are like, have literally cut travel to nothing. Like, hey, we're working remote. We're doing our outreach. Prospects are happy, Zoom, video demos. And whereas they were all road warriors, 3 years ago.
Yeah. I would say that we've gone not fully back to how things used to be, where, I mean, I remember when I was a rep, probably same as you. I mean, you were traveling almost every week. You were just on the road, just constant. That was just sort of the life. My team, my reps travel a lot. They probably travel once a month, maybe a couple times a month, but at the most, they're not traveling, certainly not every week. And sometimes they might go 6 weeks without going anywhere. I think one of the problems I think around traveling is that as people spread out, buyers spread out. And so this idea that you could just go to one place and all your buyers would be in one office has also sort of become more challenging. So even this idea of like, where do you go? Should I travel here or travel there? I don't know. It's like this the one person and it's not even an office. Like, we're just going to go there and get coffee. And so, yeah, we're traveling, but not to the levels I think that it was at before.
Do you find that you can still have form a good, tight relationship with the buyers doing it remotely, or is it just different and that's just how things are moving forward?
It's a really interesting question. I was talking to someone else about this the other day. It seems like one of the things that comes out of this remote sort of selling and buying experience is that there is sort of less of that. There's less personal relationship development time, right? You don't have the time that you walk between the conference room to the lobby and all those little moments and the chance like, hey, let's go grab dinner afterwards. And that stuff isn't there. And so what I've seen is that buyers are much more business-like and just expect sort of results faster. And they're just focused on outcomes in that sense. And there's less personal relationship development. So I think that's harder. I think it's just forced salespeople to think differently about it. But it's still happening. I mean, there's still ways to develop relationships with people virtually. You can still find ways to do it. We've done things like, some of these virtual wine events and these things that will draw people in and help get to know you. But yeah, there's nothing like being able to just physically be with somebody and talk to them in that sense.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's a crazy world. Is it opening up? Do you think is this the way we do business now moving forward forever?
I mean, it seems like people have sort of settled into a rhythm here. I mean, I know companies are still sort of toying with how many people have to come back to work and what does that look like, but most companies have not gone back to sort of a full everybody in the office all the time mode. So if that continues, it seems like this similar sort of hybrid approach on the selling side will probably continue. But I mean, there's still plenty of trade shows and events going on. I mean, people are, I was at the AWS reInvent event back in December. I mean, there was tons of people there. So, Dreamforce, there's still a lot of these big events, people are coming out for them. I don't think that's going to change. I think people are eager to get out and see people again.
Yeah, I was in Phoenix last week with Infusionsoft, now called Keep, down in Chandler, suburb of Phoenix. And man, I was shocked that they're only in the office 2 days a week.
Yeah.
And it's just, and then this huge space. It's like, what are they going to do with all this space? And
yeah.
But I just saw a thing on LinkedIn today talking about there are benefits of working together. There are demonstrable, provable ROI. So, I could see it over time going back, maybe satellite offices or something. But like I've always worked from home, so it didn't really phase me personally, but it can be harder to reach people nowadays. So I'm always looking for little ways to, it depends on the company. Some are like 100% back in the office.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like
Yeah.
it really runs the gamut, like 0% at 100% hybrid, 100% back in the office, and everywhere in between.
Right.
Which makes it a little crazy to like track people down. But
yeah, I find as a leader, the hardest part has been there's no sort of organic ways to interact with people. Just, oh, like I see you in the kitchen, or like we're both walking to get coffee, or oh, we got some. I mean, that stuff just doesn't exist. And I think like for me, I'm pretty heads down when I'm working. So not having that sort of organic way to interact with people, I'm having to really push myself to find time and to really try to be more proactive with team members. And that's probably the hardest thing I miss at the most about being in an office with everybody. And also getting to know people that maybe you wouldn't get to know otherwise, because you see them, but you wouldn't necessarily work on a project together, but they're in the office, and then you saw each other, we're both there late or whatever. So I think that definitely is a bummer. I think that's hard.
yeah. How do you find it from a leadership position? Is it easier or harder to supervise people? I mean, it seemed like maybe you're more going to stare at the screen more, maybe check logins, or, I mean, how has that changed?
Yeah, I think that certainly has it's harder with people that are remote. Even when people were in the office, you still had to, make sure you're measuring all those sort of activities and looking at people are doing, because even in the office, there's plenty of ways for people to, to look busy, but not be busy. But you can at least see if they were there, if they were present, if they were actually physically in the office. Nowadays with work from home, you just, who knows? I mean, I just have no idea, right? People could just not be around. So I think that is definitely hard. I think the plus side is that it allows people to have a little bit more flexibility during the day. And I think that gives us as leaders, a little bit of right to ask for more flexibility in other ways. It's like, okay, look, I get it. Like you need to go, you got to go help out here for a second, but then, maybe don't be as surprised when I ask you for something after work hours or whatever it might be, right? There's got to be flexibility on both sides of that.
Yeah. Have you noticed any issues from the team? Like, are they missing the social aspect of being in an office, or has it been a positive?
So Moogsoft it's been remote for as long as I've been here, but my last company, Malwarebytes, was where I was when we made the transition, and it was a pretty big, I'd say, young sales team that was very social, and we did a lot of things that were really fun in the office, a lot of parties and everything else, and that was, I think, really hard. And we try to recreate some of this stuff. Like one of the things I do at the end of every quarter, I did there was I would do a raffle, and we would, in the center of the sales floor, we would have all these prizes. We'd have like, I don't know, like game systems and audio and trips, and we'd like gift cards and all kinds of stuff. And we basically come together at the end of the quarter. We would do a raffle, and people would win all these prizes. And we did it virtually. It wasn't nearly as cool. People couldn't by and sort of see it there and be reminded why they're motivated to earn tickets for how they're doing. But we try to do some of those things. But yeah, I think people miss it. They especially, I think, people who are earlier in their career and they have less sort of things at home that are tying them down. Yeah, that's a much harder environment to move into. Or their roommates are loud, or they don't have a place to work. I remember people were working out of their garages and crazy scenarios, and the other people around them working, and it's not quiet. And so anyway, I think that it's hard, but again, there's been some benefits for some people. Some people have really enjoyed it.
Yeah. When I was with that startup in Austin, I was there for about 8 months before I moved, and we had a lot of fun. I mean, we were rowdy. Yeah. Our VP was rowdy. He'd have pinatas, like he'd have corporate events, and we're just out in the lawn, in front of the office. And
Yeah.
pinatas filled with like airline tickets,
Yeah.
$100 bills
Yeah.
and in like Easter egg, whatever, just crazy stuff,
Right.
and there's beer and there's barbecue, and it's like,
Yeah.
we were taking over the world, right? And
Yeah.
um, but I also hated the commute. I mean, it was 45 minutes one way,
Right.
and
Right.
I traveled, but like you were saying, maybe one week I'm on the road, one week I'm in the office, and that when I was in the office, like having to commute, I did not miss that when I moved to California. Then I'm 2 time zones away from everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I, yeah, I've always worked from home for the most part since 2000.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Um, so that's fine for me.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, you're in the tech space, right?
Yeah.
Is there any concern? We're hearing all kind of crazy stuff talking about China and spyware and everything else, and don't let your kids have accounts. And I don't know, are there things we should be aware of that the average non-techie doesn't know about?
Oh man, it's an interesting question. There's definitely a wide variety of opinions about this. My brother-in-law works in security at Meta, and I mean,
Oh,
his perspective on this is probably at a very different level than mine. I take a pretty pragmatic approach. I try to I tell my kids, like, make sure everyone should have anti-spyware protection on your machines and your equipment. Everyone, if you're not doing that at a minimum, that's a problem. And I think obviously being aware of sort of password management, I think those are sort of the in addition to just being aware of the sorts of things that could be fraudulent that come your way. I get a lot of these things. Sometimes they look really good, and so I think you just being aware of sort of like, just be careful. I don't know if there's like anything other than those three things, but certainly if you don't have some kind of protection on your machine, you should have something. People used to think, oh, well, Macs don't get hit with things. Like, that's absolute garbage. Like, Macs do get hit with things. And the amount of spyware and malware that's spinning up around Macs is growing at a higher rate than PCs partly because of that perception. So anyway, would encourage everyone to do that.
what do you tell your own people about social media? Do you let them post or, write a LinkedIn article about business? Because one of the first things I do when somebody reaches out to me, I go look them up,
Yeah.
and it's like, what's out there? So from a leadership management perspective, do you give guidance on that?
Not specifically. We encourage people to be active in social. And I think what I tell people is I say, look, like, think about what you're putting out there, because if all you put out there looks like just a big commercial, it's the same thing with prospecting, right? If all you're doing is a big commercial for you or your product, people aren't going to be interested in engaging in it. And so leverage social in a way that, in addition to however just kind of standard, we all leverage social in different ways for our own lives. But, from a business standpoint, find ways to add value. If you can add value to people's lives, talk about things people care about, give them examples, give them stories. That's the stuff that people care about. Don't make it a big commercial. I think I'm a big believer that's true for prospecting. I think it's true for if you're doing local events, all these things. Like, if you make it too much about selling and not really about helping and educating, I think that's where it starts to break down. And that's what people don't like about salespeople.
Yeah. Well, I get so much junk email and messaging on LinkedIn. Holy crap.
Amazing.
As everybody's cutting corners, have you been able to leverage LinkedIn for business?
Absolutely. My team uses LinkedIn a lot. One of the things that's great about LinkedIn is that sometimes when you read someone's title, you don't really know what they do. And so it can be hard to understand, is what we're selling relevant for them? By being able to actually drill into their profile and look at their background, we're able to figure out that, yeah, actually this is a relevant product, likely. We don't know for sure, but likely, given their background. And then also just communicating with people on LinkedIn, just finding, again, that's another channel to interact with folks. And it's nice because it immediately puts a name and a profile to the outreach versus it just being, another thing in their inbox. So yeah, LinkedIn's been, I would say, a very effective tool for us. And I would say for not just here, for all the companies I've been at for a long time.
Are you using the paid editions, or can you get by with the free?
That's interesting. I think it depends. I mean, if I was a scrappy early stage startup, I wouldn't pay for Navigator. Navigator is expensive. But if I was any bigger than, like if I was Series A plus, I probably would want to invest in it. The nice thing about Navigator is some of the list building is a lot better. Some of the visibility into the actual search results is better. They've got some new tech they put out there that has some intent built into it. So understanding companies that are potentially researching your space or your company. So yeah, I mean, to me, it's a sort of a must-have tool, I think, for sellers today. It's in my set of things I think I would expect every company to have. That's
Talking
yeah.
about a Navigator?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I like it. I've been on LinkedIn for a long time. It was funny. I was today on my Monday call, I posted a job and somebody had, they wanted to see it, and I went to pull it up and I had a draft job in there from 15 years ago.
Wow. That's amazing.
I was helping a friend of mine, and cause I was one of like the first 100,000 users. They sent me an email years ago, and like, damn, I think I got on in like 2004. I think I got on, and yeah, I've used it extensively. But it's like, I think it was Seth Godin, said marketers ruin everything. And it's like, I feel like they've ruined LinkedIn. I mean, just the junk that I get, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I like to ask people, because part of me is just jaded. I've been in it for so long. It's like, somebody please remind me that it's not all that bad.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but to your point though, I mean, I get as much junk LinkedIn stuff as I do my regular email. I mean, it's a similar volume is similar on both ends of it. And it's annoying because unfortunately every once in a while, great stuff gets lost because it's buried in the pile of crap. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
How are buyers today? We talked about they're a little harder to reach, to cut to the chase a little bit more. Do you feel like, are they tougher negotiators as well? Or do they open up, like once you do reach them and connect, do they open up better now? Or are they just sort of tougher nut to crack overall?
I don't know that buyers have, I don't know. My experience hasn't been that buyers have really changed a whole lot in that sense. I think, I think about customers I had many years ago that I'm still close with. And there's people that I'm meeting today that I'm sure I'll still be close with in 10, 15 years from now. I think that's pretty similar. I do think that, especially in the last, 6 months though, in this sort of macroeconomic climate that's been going on, it's been a lot harder, and that a lot more scrutiny on deals. I mean, there's, before it was like, I even saw this during COVID too, where at Malwarebytes, where it was like, before we probably could have got some deal pushed through at this level, then it required 2 more levels up, it required, and you're thinking, this isn't that big of an investment, but it still required very high level approval for it. And I think, so a lot more scrutiny on how money's being spent, who it's being spent with, redundancy in terms of vendor, tool sprawl, things like that. So I think that's gotten harder, but I think the fundamental sort of buyer-seller relationship is still intact.
So are you saying since COVID, there's been more scrutiny, or just since the last 6 months, or both?
Both. I mean, I think there was like, COVID hit and it was like, oh my God, that was like the beginning of pain. And I think things kind of leveled out a little bit and things were kind of pumping. And then in the last 6 months, I think it's kind of gotten bad again. We used to say during COVID, it was like, 30% more work for 80% of the results. It was like, that's what it felt like. You're putting in more and you're getting less. And now I think when I think about deals, it's like, wow, it's like, just expect it's going to take probably 20, 30% longer than it did before. And it's going to probably require at least 1 or 2 more people to approve it than we had to do before, is my guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the recession is here. It's certainly very close, if not. And that I'm getting kind of the same input from people I'm talking to. So
Yeah.
client of mine is in shipping, and rates have come down. He said to pre-pandemic levels, which was interesting.
Hmm.
So because they got into nosebleed, it was unbelievable how the whole supply chain stuff. I mean, golly.
Yeah.
So it's like good and bad, all right, things have become more affordable, but then is it because of recession?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's why you better know how to sell, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh man, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. So you, like I said, you're a little different, being in the corporate America enterprise space. Do you want our listeners to reach out? Should they check out Moogsoft? What do you want folks to do after listening to this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think if anybody if you work in an organization and you're concerned with the uptime of your applications and services, and you've got pain around that, then yeah, reach out. Love to chat. If anybody wants to just chat about sales in general, happy to chat about stuff. There's something I'm passionate about. I love selling. I've been selling my whole life. I like the technology, I like the process, I like the theory, all of it. So yeah, happy to engage.
All right. Well, I get up to San Francisco sometime to see my son. So I'll give you a shout if I do. If you come south, let me know.
Let's do it, man. We'll get a scotch for you and a bourbon for me.
Hey, I do bourbon too.
Okay.
I probably do less bourbon. That's why it's on my desk as
Okay.
my camera mount, because the bourbon's over here to my left and the scotch is to my right. So I keep them separated so they don't fight. I
Win fighting. Yeah.
gotta keep peace in here.
Yeah. Right on.
Oh man, very nice.
Stuff.
All right, man. Mike Cabot, thanks for coming on the show. It's been great.
Wes, thanks so much. Appreciate it, man.
Have a good one.